Every single second, deep inside your body, trillions of your cells are making a critical decision. It's a choice so fundamental that pretty much everything about your health depends on them getting it right, over and over and over again. So today, we're going to dive into one of the most basic questions in all of biology. And that decision is this: should I divide and create a new cell, or should I just stop? Now, if they get it right, your tissues grow, they repair themselves, everything is great. But if they get it wrong, well, that can lead to things like uncontrolled growth, think cancer, or on the flip side, premature aging. So how on earth does a cell know what to do? Well, a cell's life is run by something we call the cell cycle. The best way to think about it is like a high-speed racetrack. A cell is racing around this track, and it has to hit very specific checkpoints before it's even allowed to cross the finish line and divide. The whole thing has to be perfectly controlled. I mean, imagine a race car with no brakes, just keeps going. You'd get a massive pileup, right? So, to solve this whole mystery, scientists first had to find the cell's main braking system. And that brings us to the real star of our story today, a molecule with a pretty simple name for a hugely important job. It's a protein called P21, and you can think of it as the cell's main brake pedal. It's that simple. When P21 is active, when that pedal is pressed all the way to the floor, the cell cycle engine just stops and the cell does not divide. It is the body's most essential stop signal. But here's the thing, right? A brake that's always on is just as bad as a brake that doesn't work at all. For a healthy cell to actually grow and divide when it's supposed to, something has to be able to lift the foot off that P21 brake pedal at exactly the right moment. And for the longest time, nobody had a clue what that something was. The answer, it turns out, came from a really unexpected place. It involves a type of molecule that most of us have heard of, but usually in a totally different and, frankly, much more negative way. Yeah, we're talking about reactive oxygen species, or ROS. You've probably heard of them by their other name, free radicals. And for decades, they were just seen as the villains, the bad guys causing damage and aging. But it turns out they have a double life. At the right levels, they are absolutely essential signaling molecules, carrying critical messages all around the cell. So a research team led by first author Julia Vorhauser and senior author Jörg Mansfeld decided to follow this clue. They had a hunch. Could these reactive molecules, these ROS, be the mysterious signal that was telling the cell when to take its foot off the P21 brake? And what they found was absolutely stunning. It wasn't some long, complicated chain of command. No, it was a direct, elegant, and incredibly tiny mechanism built right into the brake pedal itself. What they found was a molecular on-off switch, a single, precise spot on that P21 protein that acts just like a toggle, and it instantly changes how the entire brake system works. It's such a beautifully simple solution to a really complex problem. Okay, so here's how it works. The switch is made of a single amino acid called a cysteine, a position 41 on the protein, so they call it C41. And when those ROS molecules, our signal, show up at just the right time, they react with C41. It's a chemical process called oxidation, and this one simple reaction literally flips the switch. So let's put this all together. By default, the C41 switch is in the off position. In science speak, they call this the reduced state. And when it's off, the P21 brake is strong. It clamps down hard on the cell's engine and stops division. But when those ROS molecules arrive, they oxidize C41, and click, they flip the switch to on. This tiny change actually alters P21's shape just enough that it can't hold on as tightly anymore. The brake is weakened, the pedal is released, and the cell gets the green light to go ahead and divide. It's just an incredibly elegant system. And of course, they had to prove it, right? So the researchers got clever. They created a version of P21 where the C41 switch was basically jammed in the off position. And the results were crystal clear. A normal P21 protein has a half-life of about 2.5 hours. That's how long it takes for half of it to get cleared away. But the version with the jammed switch, it stuck around for more than 5 hours. The brake was effectively stuck on. Okay, so a tiny switch makes a huge decision. Cool. But what does this actually mean for the cell and for us when this super simple mechanism goes wrong? Well, the consequences, as it turns out, are pretty profound. See, a cell that can't release its own brake is a cell that's in deep trouble.
It loses its ability to be flexible, to respond and grow the way it's supposed to, and that has a huge ripple effect on the whole tissue it's a part of.
Specifically, what Vorhauser and her colleagues found was that when that C41 switch is jammed off, cells become really fragile and hypersensitive to stress. They start dividing way more slowly, and they're much more likely to just give up on dividing altogether. And ultimately, they get pushed into this state of permanent retirement called senescence, which, you guessed it, is a key driver of aging. As the authors themselves put it, this tiny little C41 switch is what tunes the entire system. It's like the fine-tuning dial that stops our cells from giving up too early, from aging prematurely, and it makes sure that our tissues can keep renewing themselves properly. And this whole discovery leaves us with a really tantalizing question. This core decision, to divide or to stop, it's at the very heart of both aging and cancer. So now that we found one of the master switches that controls it, could we learn to tune it ourselves? Could we, one day, develop therapies that intentionally flip this switch to help us fight disease?